They poured concrete into my only well while I was at work, and by the time I got home, the water that kept me alive in that desert was gone like it never existed. So I shut down their entire development before that concrete even had a chance to fully cure. I live about 40 minutes outside a place most folks wouldn't even call a town, just a stretch of sunburned land out in southern New Mexico, where the wind never really stops and the ground cracks if you look at it wrong. 7 acres, give or take, nothing fancy. Just a small house I fixed up myself, a few goats, some chickens that act like they own the place, and a garden that only survives because I'm stubborn enough to keep hauling life out of dry soil. There's no city water out here, no backup line, no friendly utility truck rolling by if something goes wrong. There's just one well, drilled back in the late 70s by a man named Walter Haynes, the original owner, who apparently believed in doing things once and doing them right. That well wasn't optional, not out here. It fed my house, kept my animals alive, and honestly, it was the only reason this land was worth anything at all. For years, nobody bothered me. Nearest neighbor was half a mile away, an older guy named Ron who mostly kept to himself unless he needed help fixing a fence or wanted to complain about the heat like it was something new. Life was quiet, predictable in that way that makes you forget how fast things can change. Then came Redwood Vista Development. You started seeing the signs first, big glossy boards stuck into the dirt along the main road, promising luxury desert living, modern builds, exclusive community experience, that kind of language that sounds real nice until you realize it usually means they're about to bulldoze half the landscape and triple the property taxes. Within a couple weeks, trucks started rolling in, heavy equipment, survey crews, guys in reflective vests pacing off land like they already owned it. And technically, they did own the parcel right next to mine. At first, I didn't think much of it. People build out here all the time, usually one house at a time, slow and careful. But this was different. This was fast, aggressive, like they were racing something. The first time I met their site manager, his name was Darren Cole, tall guy, clean boots that had never really seen dirt, mirrored sunglasses even though the sun was going down. He walked right up to my fence line one evening while I was fixing a gate hinge and introduced himself like we were about to become business partners. "Afternoon," he said, glancing around like he was already evaluating the place. "We're heading up the project next door, just doing some preliminary checks." I nodded, kept working. "Yeah, I figured." He stepped closer to the fence, clipboard tucked under his arm. "Mind if I ask a few questions about your property line?" That's when I looked up. Not because the question was strange, but because of how casually he asked it, like the answer didn't really matter. "Lines are marked," I said, pointing toward the rusted stakes that had been there longer than I had. "Survey was done years ago." He followed my finger, then nodded slowly. "Got it. And you've been here how long?" "Long enough," I said. There was a pause, the kind that stretches just a little too long. Then he asked the question that, at the time, didn't seem like much, but later, it stuck in my head like a warning I didn't recognize soon enough. "Where do you get your water out here?" I wiped my hands on my jeans and pointed over my shoulder. "Well, right there." He turned, looked at the well cap sticking out of the ground about 30 yards from the house, a simple metal cover, nothing fancy, but to me it might as well have been gold. He nodded again, slower this time. "That your only source?" "Yeah." Another pause, then a small smile, polite but empty. "Understood," he said. And that was it. He thanked me, turned around, and walked back toward his trucks like he'd just checked off a box. I didn't think much of it that night. Honestly, I should have. Over the next couple months, the noise picked up. Engines at sunrise, backup alarms echoing across the land, dust clouds drifting over like weather that nobody invited. They graded land, brought in concrete forms, started laying out roads where there used to be nothing but scrub and silence. Ron came by one afternoon, leaned on my fence, and shook his head. "They're moving too fast," he muttered. "Folks that move that fast usually don't plan on asking permission twice." I laughed it off. "Not my land, not my problem." He looked at me sideways. "That's what everyone says, right up until it is." I remember that conversation real clear now, because about 2 weeks later, it was. It was a Tuesday, nothing special, just another long day working maintenance over at a warehouse near the highway. I got home a little before sunset, same as always, dusty, tired, already thinking about dinner and maybe sitting out back for a bit before the temperature dropped. I walked inside, set my keys down, turned on the kitchen faucet, and nothing came out. Not a drip. Not even that sputtering sound you get when pressure's low. Just silence. At first, I figured it was the pump. It happens sometimes, especially in the heat. I walked out back to check the pressure tank dead. No hum, no vibration, nothing. That's when something in my chest tightened. Not panic exactly, but close enough to taste. I started walking toward the well, slow at first, then faster without really realizing it. And then I saw it. The cap was gone. And where the opening should have been, there was smooth, wet concrete, filled all the way to the top, still glistening under the last light of the sun like it had just been poured minutes ago. A thin gray spill had run down the sides and hardened along the dirt, and sitting just inside my fence line, like it had every right to be there, was a cement truck, engine idling low, driver leaning out the window like he was waiting for instructions. I stopped dead in my tracks. For a second, I honestly thought I was looking at something that wasn't real, like my brain just hadn't caught up yet. Then it hit me. Someone had just buried my water supply in concrete. And I knew exactly who had the nerve to do it. I didn't run. I didn't yell, not right away. I just stood there for a few seconds longer than made sense, staring at that fresh concrete like maybe if I looked hard enough it would crack open and give me my water back. Like this was all some kind of mistake that could still undo itself. But the engine of that cement truck kept idling, low and steady, and the smell of wet mix hung in the air, sharp and final. And that's when it sank in. This wasn't an accident. This was done on purpose. I walked toward the truck slow, boots crunching on gravel, my hands already tightening without me telling them to. The driver looked down at me, chewing something, probably gum, like this was just another job. "Who told you to pour that?" I asked, keeping my voice level, even though I could feel it wanting to break. He shrugged, barely made eye contact. "Supervisor said it was an abandoned well. Needed to be sealed. County regulation." I let that sit there for a second. "Abandoned?" He nodded, like that settled it. I pointed past him. "You see that power line running to it? You see the pressure tank behind the house? You think abandoned wells still run electricity?" He shifted a little, uncomfortable now, but still defensive. "Look, man, I just do what I'm told. Orders came through the site office." Of course they did. I didn't waste another word on him. I pulled out my phone, took pictures, wide shots, close-ups, video of the concrete still wet, the truck sitting inside my fence, the tracks it left cutting across my land like it belonged there. Every angle I could think of. Something in me had already flipped, not into panic, but into focus. Then I called Darren. He picked up on the third ring, sounding annoyed, like I'd interrupted something important. "Yeah. You just filled my well with concrete," I said. There was a pause, but not the kind you'd expect. Not confusion, not surprise, just a pause like he was deciding how much he cared about the conversation. "Yeah," he said finally. "That well was flagged in our setback zone. County doesn't allow and used wells that close to development." I felt my jaw tighten. "It's not in used. It's active. It's mine. And it's on my property." Another pause, shorter this time. "Well," he said, like he was explaining something simple to a kid, "you'll have to drill another one." That was it. No apology, no hesitation, no acknowledgement that he might have just cut off someone's only water supply in the middle of the desert, just a shrug wrapped in a sentence. Something in me went quiet right then. Not calm, just quiet. "Yeah," I said softly. "We'll see about that." I hung up before he could say anything else. I stood there for another minute, looking at the well, or what used to be the well, and I thought about how long it would take for my animals to start feeling it, how fast the garden would go, how the house itself would turn into nothing without water running through it. And I realized this wasn't just damage. This was someone deciding my life out here didn't matter. So I got in my truck and drove. Didn't even go inside. Didn't grab anything. Just turned the engine over and headed straight toward town, dust trailing behind me like something was chasing. Carla Bennett's office sits in a low brick building off Main Street. Nothing flashy, but if you've lived out here long enough you know her name. She handles land disputes, water rights, all the messy stuff that happens when people start drawing lines on places that used to be left alone. I walked in without an appointment, still covered in dust, phone in my hand. Her assistant looked up, surprised. "Can I help?" "I need to see Carla," I said. Something in my voice must have carried, because a second later Carla herself stepped out from the back, glasses low on her nose, sharp eyes that missed nothing. "What's going on?" she asked. I held up my phone. They filled my well. She didn't react right away, just motioned me inside. Show me. I played the video, no commentary, just the footage, the concrete, the truck, the mess they left behind. She watched the whole thing without interrupting, then leaned back in her chair and let out a slow breath. That, she said, tapping the screen lightly, is a problem. For them or for me? I asked. A faint smile touched the corner of her mouth. Depends how much paperwork you've got. That's when things started moving fast. I pulled out everything I had, old documents I kept in a folder at home, pictures of the well from when I first bought the place, the pump installation receipt, electrical permits. Carla went through it all like she was assembling a case in real time. Original drilling record? She asked. Yeah. Water rights filed. Transferred when I bought the land. She nodded, flipping pages. Good. Very good. Then she reached for her phone. I'm calling the county water authority, she said, already dialing. Don't say anything. I listened to her side of the conversation, calm, precise, like she'd done this 100 times. Hi, this is Carla Bennett. Yes, I need an inspector out immediately. Active well, privately owned. Appears to have been sealed with concrete without authorization. Yes, I have documentation. Yes, I'll be here. She hung up and looked at me. They'll be there within a couple hours, she said. You did the right thing not touching anything. I nodded, but my mind was still back on my land, on that well, on how quiet the place must feel without water running. Go back, she added. Stay there. Don't let them move anything else. I didn't argue. By the time I got back, the sun had dropped lower, shadows stretching long across the dirt. The cement truck was gone, but the damage was still there, hardening by the minute. I parked near the house and just stood there for a while, listening, and the silence felt wrong, like something essential had been ripped out. About an hour later, a county truck rolled up, followed by another. 2 inspectors stepped out, both wearing badges and the kind of expressions that said they weren't here to make friends. You the property owner? One of them asked. Yeah. He nodded toward the well. Show us. I walked them over, pointed everything out, answered questions. They crouched down, examined the casing, scraped at the concrete, took measurements, photos. One of them even checked the electrical line still running to the pump. How long ago was this poured? The other asked. Couple hours, maybe less. He exchanged a look with his partner. Then the first inspector stood up and shook his head slowly. They didn't just mess up, he muttered. They crossed a line. I didn't say anything, because at that point, I already knew. The second inspector stepped back from the well, brushed his hands together, and pulled out his phone, not in a rushed way, not panicked, just deliberate, like he already knew exactly what needed to happen next. He made a quick call, spoke in short sentences, gave coordinates, mentioned active permitted well and unauthorized sealing. And that was it, no drama, just facts, but the kind of facts that carry weight. I remember standing there, the sky turning that deep orange you only get out in the desert, and for the first time since I got home, I felt something shift. Not relief, not yet, but the sense that this wasn't just me against them anymore. About 20 minutes later, another county vehicle pulled up, then another, and then, almost like word had spread faster than anyone expected, you could see activity down at the entrance to the development. Trucks slowing, workers stepping out, confusion starting to ripple through a place that, just hours earlier, had been running like a machine. One of the inspectors looked at me. You might want to stick around, he said. This is about to get interesting. He wasn't wrong. We drove down together toward the development entrance, dust kicking up behind us, and by the time we got there, everything had already started to change. A couple of county officials were talking to crew leads, pointing at paperwork, shaking their heads. Someone had rolled out a set of bright red tags, the kind you don't ignore, and they were starting to go up. One on a bulldozer, one on a concrete mixer, another on a stack of materials that hadn't even been unloaded yet. Work didn't just slow down, it stopped. Engines shut off. Conversations dropped into low murmurs, and that constant noise that had filled the air for weeks just died. Then Darren showed up. He came walking fast from one of the trailers, sunglasses gone now, face tight, jaw set like he was already halfway into an argument. What's going on? He demanded, looking from one inspector to the other like this was some kind of misunderstanding he could clear up with the right tone. The lead inspector didn't raise his voice, didn't match the energy, just handed him a clipboard. What's going on? He said calmly. is that your company sealed an active, permitted water well without authorization on private property. Darren glanced at the paperwork, then back up, irritation flashing into something sharper. That was a subcontractor error, he said quickly. We flagged that structure as abandoned based on preliminary assessment. The inspector cut him off with a small shake of his head. Doesn't matter who poured the concrete. The permit holder is responsible. That landed. You could see it in Darren's face, that split second where he realized this wasn't going to be smoothed over with a conversation. That well, the inspector continued, had an active pump, electrical connection, and registered water rights tied to it. You don't get to decide it's abandoned because it's inconvenient to your layout. Darren's eyes flicked toward me then, just for a second, and there was something there now that hadn't been there before. Not confidence, not control, something closer to calculation, maybe even a hint of regret, though it was buried under too much ego to fully show. This is going to delay the project, he said, like that was the real issue. The inspector didn't even blink. It's going to stop the project. And just like that, it was done. More red tags went up, official notices posted along the entrance, paperwork handed out that nobody wanted to be holding. Trucks that had been lined up to come in started turning around one by one, drivers shaking their heads, some of them already on the phone. A few workers just stood there, hands on hips, watching weeks of momentum disappear in real time. I stayed off to the side, not saying much, just watching. Because this wasn't about shouting or proving a point anymore. This was consequences. Darren tried a few more angles. You could see it, stepped aside with one of the officials, lowered his voice, probably thinking there was still a way to negotiate, to reframe, to shift blame somewhere else. But every time he came back, his expression got a little tighter, a little more controlled, like he was realizing the same thing I had, just from the other side. He didn't have the leverage anymore. Eventually, the inspector came back over to me. They're going to be required to drill you a new well, he said, straightforward. Deeper than the original, up to current standards. At their expense. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. And the old one? I asked, nodding back toward my land. He shook his head slightly. That one's gone. But you'll be getting something better. There was a pause. Then he added, they're also looking at fines, and their grading permits suspended for the season. That last part hit differently. Out here, you lose a season, you don't just lose time, you lose money, contracts, momentum. Sometimes you lose the whole project. I nodded. All right. We stood there for another minute, watching the last of the equipment get shut down, the site settling into a kind of forced stillness that felt almost unnatural after all the noise. Then I turned and headed back to my truck. The drive home felt different than the one earlier, slower, quieter, like everything had shifted just a little. Over the next few weeks, things played out exactly the way the inspector said they would. Crews came back, but not to build houses, to fix what they broke. A new drilling team showed up, specialists this time, the kind of guys who measure twice, check everything, and don't touch a thing until they're absolutely sure. They drilled deeper than the original well, hit a stronger aquifer, installed a new pump, updated the wiring, did it all by the book. I watched most of it from a distance, not out of spite, just because I needed to see it done right. One of the drillers, older guy with a sunburned neck and a voice like gravel, nodded toward the rig one afternoon. You're going to get better flow out of this one, he said. Cleaner too. I nodded back. That's what I hear. He gave a small smile. Sometimes it takes a mess to get an upgrade. Maybe he was right. By the time they finished, water was running stronger than it ever had before, steady, reliable, like the land itself had decided to give something back after all that. As for Redwood Vista, things didn't bounce back the way they probably expected. Losing that permit slowed everything down. Investors started asking questions, timelines slipped, and out here, once a project loses momentum, it doesn't always recover. I saw Darren once more, a few weeks later, standing near the edge of the property line. No clipboard this time, no sunglasses, just looking out at the land like he was trying to figure out where it all went wrong. He noticed me watching and walked over, slower than before. We're making it right, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. I leaned against the fence. You're fixing what you broke. A small pause. Yeah, he admitted. Another silence settled in. Not hostile, just honest in a way neither of us had been at the start. You ever think, I said after a moment, about asking first? He let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but there wasn't much humor in it. Out here, things move fast. I shook my head slightly. Yeah, until they don't. He didn't argue with that. After a second, he nodded once and walked back toward his site, shoulders a little lower than before. And that was the last real conversation we had. Now, when I turn on my faucet, the water comes out stronger than it ever did, steady, cold, dependable. But every time I hear it, there's still a part of me that remembers that silence, that moment when it was gone, and how quickly something essential can disappear when someone decides it doesn't matter. So here's the question I've been thinking about, and I'm curious what you think. Was it just a mistake that got out of hand? Or was it arrogance, plain and simple, thinking they could take what they needed and deal with the fallout later? And more importantly, if you were in my place, would you have handled it the same way? Or would you have pushed it even further? Let me know in the comments. Because out here, lines matter, and once someone crosses one, it's hard to pretend it was ever just an accident.